There is a place in Ireland where the land seems to hush, where stories go missing, where names slip into the wind, and where people whisper instead of speak. They call it the Vanishing Triangle, a stretch of earth where the ordinary world thins, and the edges of reality feel porous. Tonight, let's walk into it together, slowly, gently, with the kind of silence that listens back. Chapter 1. A line drawn in mystery. The Vanishing Triangle feels less like a geographic area, and more like a mood that settles over you. Quietly, almost politely, the way mist curls over a field before you even realize the weather's changed. It's not just a place you step into. It's a sensation that slips under your skin, a subtle tightening in your chest, a prickle along your arms, even when the wind hasn't moved a single blade of grass. People talk about it in terms of land. Dublin, Wicklow, Kildare, Meath, Wexford. A neat little cluster on a map. But anyone who has ever stood on those roads at dusk knows the borders don't matter. Lines on a page don't capture the way the air shifts. When you cross some invisible threshold, it doesn't announce itself. It doesn't roar. It just watches. Because the triangle isn't defined by geography. It's defined by mood, by a sense of stepping sideways into a story that refuses to explain itself, as if the land is holding its breath, waiting for you to ask a question you'll never want the answer to. This region sits in an overlap, not quite supernatural, not entirely ordinary. A quiet seam where two worlds brush up against each other. One world full of routine and daylight. School runs, traffic lights, corner shops, church bells. And underneath it, something older, quieter, and unsettlingly patient. A presence that doesn't chase. It simply waits. When the first women vanished, Ireland tried to file it under the usual explanations. An accident on a lonely road. A moment of bad luck. A coincidence that would make sense later. People told themselves what they needed to sleep at night. That these were isolated tragedies. In a country where tragedy was no stranger. But the disappearances didn't stay separate. They grew roots. They threaded themselves through towns. And slipped along country lanes. And wrapped around forest paths. Like ivy claiming an old stone wall. Each new case echoed the last. Just enough to stir unease. But never enough to feel certain of anything. Villages whispered. Families watched the horizon differently. Women stopped walking alone at dusk. And slowly, one unsettling truth became impossible to ignore. The same stretch of land kept swallowing people whole. Somewhere along the way. Nobody knows exactly when. Someone whispered a name. A label to hold the fear in place. The Vanishing Triangle. A phrase that stuck itself to Ireland's consciousness. Like a shadow drawn with ink. And once it had a name, it could no longer be dismissed. It became a wound on the map, an outline people recognized, even if they didn't want to look directly at it. Because sometimes a place isn't just a place. Sometimes it is a silence, a question, a breath that never comes out. And the Vanishing Triangle became exactly that, a mystery etched into the landscape, waiting for someone brave enough to stand inside it and listen. Chapter 2. The Disappearances. The disappearances did not unfold in storms or under Gothic, thunder-soaked skies. There were no ominous shadows stretching across the land. No cinematic warnings that something terrible was about to happen. Instead, they occurred in daylight. Honest, ordinary daylight. The kind that makes the world feel safe. Right up until it isn't. They happen on normal days. Bright afternoons when the sun warmed the pavement. Quiet mornings filled with birdsong and routine. Moments so painfully ordinary that looking back feels almost cruel. As if the world offered no hint that anything was about to fracture. A woman heading to work, keys in one hand, bag in the other, planning her day in her head, without realizing she would never arrive. A girl visiting a friend, laughing, texting, moving through familiar streets. A mother stepping out for a walk, expecting to return before the kettle cooled. A student waiting for a bus, checking the time, thinking about homework, completely unaware that these would be the last minutes anyone ever saw them. They vanished in the narrow spaces, between one heartbeat and the next, in those strange, fragile slices of time that feel impossible to catch, impossible to understand. One moment present, the next gone, not with chaos, not with noise, but with a quietness so sharp. It feels like a blade. Search parties combed through woods, calling their names until their voices cracked. The sound drifted into the trees, echoing through branches and bramble. But it never came back. Volunteers walked miles of overgrown backroads, boots sinking into mud, fighting through hedgerows that clawed at their clothing. They searched under bridges, along ditches, across fields that looked unchanged, yet felt undeniably wrong. Some waded through bogland, that strange, ancient ground that seems almost alive, soft and deceptive, as if it could swallow secrets. Without leaving a ripple, the land in those places breathes under your feet, shifting in a way that makes you question what lies beneath the surface and how long it has been waiting there. Helicopters scanned miles of countryside that appeared perfectly undisturbed, stretching out in calm, innocent silence, as if nothing had ever happened, like the land was pretending, like the world was holding its own secrets, tight against its chest. No footprints, no belongings, no signs of a struggle, just absence. Sharp, disorienting absence. The kind that leaves the air feeling incomplete, like a sentence without an ending. Each disappearance had a timestamp, the moment someone last saw them, the place they were supposed to be, the final conversation that now plays in memory, like a recording you can't bear to listen to, and can't bring yourself to stop replaying. But the story never continued. It simply stopped, cleanly, brutally, like a page ripped out of a book, right when the plot was about to make sense. And all that remained was empty space, where a life should have been. Chapter 3. The silence that followed. Ireland has a particular kind of quiet. Not the empty kind, but the kind that hums gently beneath everything. A quiet that settles into the corners of rooms, like a folded blanket, that lingers in the soft drift of peat smoke, that rests in the curve of the coastline, where waves roll in with their usual rhythm, as though the world has all the time it needs. It's a quiet that feels familiar, almost comforting, until suddenly, it isn't. After the disappearances, that quiet grew heavier. It thickened. It pressed against the walls of homes and seeped into the spaces between conversations. It became the kind of silence you don't notice at first, because it hides in the ordinary. And then one day, you realize it has wrapped itself around everything. Families found themselves suspended between hope and heartbreak, living in a place where time felt strange. A phone rings, and your breath catches in your throat. Before you even manage to say hello, a knock on the door, and your pulse leaps, as if expecting news you're not prepared to hear. Every day becomes an endless waiting room, a hallway with too many doors, and behind each one is nothing. No answers, no closure, just more questions, circling the same hollow space. Villagers learned to speak in lowered voices, their words softened by fear, as though speaking too loudly might invite something unwelcome to listen. Conversations became a patchwork of uneasy observations. Something's off. Mind yourself going home. She should have been back by now. These phrases slipped out quietly, shared over cups of tea held with trembling hands. The kind of trembling people try to hide by tightening their grip on the mug. You could feel the tension in homes where the television played too softly, where radios stayed on long past bedtime, just to fill the emptiness. People opened curtains slowly, as if the morning might reveal news they weren't ready to bear. The Gardaí searched, methodical and determined. Press conferences were held, voices steady, faces drawn tight from sleepless nights. Posters fluttered on lampposts in the rain, their corners curling, the faces on them fading. As weeks turned into months, communities stapled new posters over old ones, each layer a reminder of how long the quiet had been growing. But underneath all the official effort, the search grids, the briefings, the statements, there was something else, a feeling people couldn't name, a sense that something was moving unseen through the heart of the triangle, slipping between hedgerows and over low stone walls, as silent as the mist, and just as impossible to catch. People began locking their doors earlier, not out of panic, but out of instinct, an ancient, animal kind of knowing that whispers, "Be careful now." Walking in pairs became normal. Parents kept their children's hands just a little tighter. On evening strolls, teenagers who once took shortcuts home began sticking to lit roads, even if it meant an extra half hour. It wasn't paranoia. It was protection. The land itself felt unsettled, as if it were holding its breath, waiting for something to shift, waiting for the quiet to finally confess what it had been hiding. Chapter 4. Theories, Shadows, and Uncertainty. As the disappearances continued, Theories began to spread like roots underground, quietly at first, branching beneath conversations, pushing their way into every living room, pub, and parish hall in the counties that bordered the triangle. People needed explanations, and when answers refused to surface, the mind started growing its own. Speculation became a kind of survival, a way to make sense of what refused to make sense. Some believed a single predator was responsible, someone who knew the land, the way you know the lines of your own palm, someone who understood the rhythm of rural roads, the shortcuts barely visible beneath overgrowth, the habits and timing of ordinary people, going through their ordinary days. A person who studied patterns, who waited for quiet moments no one would think twice about, someone patient, invisible, unimaginably calculated. The thought alone was enough to make people triple-check their locks. Others believed the disappearances were unrelated, a series of tragic accidents, terrible coincidences, woven together by fear's natural instinct to connect the dots even where none exist. People pointed to unpredictable terrain, to winding roads with blind corners, to rivers that swelled without warning. They said grief could make anything look like a pattern, when, in truth, the world is often colder and more chaotic than any monster. Then there were whispers, the kind of whispers that slip out when people are tired and the fire burns low. Whispers about human trafficking rings, operating silently in the shadows. Whispers about misidentification, about someone who might have simply chosen to disappear, only to be folded into a larger, more frightening narrative. Whispers about misadventure, about people wandering into danger, without realizing they'd taken the wrong path, on the wrong day. And inevitably, because this is Ireland, there were murmurs of something older, supernatural folklore, the ghosts of the land, the ancient stories that cling to bogs and forests. Like mist at dawn, people half joked, but only half, that the banshee's wail had changed shape, that old spirits were stirring, that the land itself had grown hungry, because Ireland never forgets its ghosts. And sometimes fear slips naturally into the shape of an old tale, but every theory frayed eventually, falling apart at the edges, no matter how tightly people try to hold them. Evidence was scarce, painfully, impossibly scarce. Patterns overlapped, but never fully aligned. One detail would make sense, only for the next to unravel it completely. Witness accounts dissolved under scrutiny, fading like breath on a cold window. Some people remembered too much, others too little. Timelines contradicted each other. Distances didn't match. Moments that seemed crucial slipped like water through fingers. The second investigators tried to grasp them, it was as if the truth itself refused to be found, as if every time investigators drew near, the answers retreated, just a step further into the fog. Still, investigators kept circling the same questions, dragging them around like weights. Who? Why? How? Every answer they reached for led only to more fog, more dark corners, more aching uncertainty that pressed down on communities already stretched thin with fear. Theories kept people talking, on doorsteps, in pubs, at kitchen tables where tea went cold. As conversations looped in circles, talking felt like something. Talking created the illusion of movement. In a story where nothing was moving at all, but none of the theories, not a single one, brought anyone home. Chapter 5. The women at the heart of it. Beyond the mystery, beyond the headlines, beyond the fear that wrapped itself around towns and homes, there were women, real women, women who lived full, textured lives, long before they became names printed on posters, fluttering in the Irish rain. It's easy for stories like this to turn people into symbols, into cautionary tales, into shadows. But these women were never shadows. They were bright, vibrant, complicated lives, with dreams, routines, joys, and frustrations, woven into every ordinary day. They loved music, the kind that filled living rooms on quiet evenings, and blasted from car radios on spontaneous drives. They had favorite songs, songs that now bring tears to the people who love them, because they can no longer listen without feeling a hollow ache. They laughed loudly, with that full-body Irish laughter that makes everyone else join in, even when they don't know what the joke is. Some of them had a laugh you could hear across a pub. Some had a shy giggle, reserved only for the people they trusted. Each laugh is remembered now, in soundless flashes, echoes that live in memory. Instead of the air, they had best friends, who still catch themselves checking their phones, opening old message threads, reading over conversations, just to feel close to someone who should still be here. Friends who keep birthdays in their calendars, even though the reminders hurt. Friends who still say their names out loud, because silence feels like betrayal. They had pets that waited by the door, tails thumping, ears perked, not understanding why the person they adored never came back. They had children who kept asking questions that no adult could answer without breaking. And they had parents who aged overnight, carrying grief so heavy it seemed to bend their very posture. They weren't symbols. They weren't statistics. They were people, with favorite mugs, with half-read books beside their beds, with habits like leaving the radio on, or humming while they cooked. They were people, with future chapters waiting to be written, until those chapters were stolen. In the most senseless way imaginable, Ireland carries them gently, not in loud, dramatic gestures, but in subtle, tender ways that slip into everyday life. In photos tucked carefully into wallets, edges worn from years of being held, in candles lit during Mass, each flame a small, steady vow that these women will not be forgotten. In stories whispered at kitchen tables, long after midnight, when the house is quiet, and grief becomes easier to speak of. In low, trembling voices, each woman is remembered, not for how she vanished, but for how she lived, for the warmth she brought into rooms, for the people she lifted, for the light she carried, without even realizing it. Because in the end, the triangle isn't defined by the darkness of the disappearances. It is defined by the tenderness of the remembering, the soft, stubborn refusal to let these women fade into abstraction. Their stories remain in every candle, every whispered memory, every small act of keeping them alive. And that tenderness, that collective holding, is what gives the story its heart. Chapter 6. The Triangle Today. Today, the Vanishing Triangle feels like a place suspended between past and present, as though time there moves differently, not slower, not faster, just heavier. A place where old grief still sits at the kitchen table, but now it sits beside new hope, the two of them sharing the same quiet space, without canceling each other out. It's a region shaped by memory, but no longer defined by silence. Cold cases that once gathered dust have been reopened, file by file, name by name. New teams of investigators step into the long shadow of history, armed with sharper tools, advanced forensics, modern mapping technologies, DNA techniques that didn't exist when the disappearances first shook the country. They re-examine clues that were once considered dead ends, looking at them with fresh eyes, unclouded by the limitations of the past. And each year, each breakthrough in science, each new perspective, brings the possibility that one more answer might finally surface. One truth, one piece of the story that has remained hidden for far too long. Yet the land itself remains eerily still, forests thick with silence, their shadows pooling in places that feel older than memory. Roads twist through the countryside, like secrets etched into the earth, narrow and winding, pulling you deeper into a territory that seems to know how to keep its mysteries. Fields stretch wide and open, beneath soft Irish skies, places where you can see for miles, yet still somehow feel watched, as though the past lingers just outside your line of sight. But something has changed in the people who live within and around the triangle. For years there was hesitation, a tightness in the throat, whenever the subject came up. Now, people talk openly. They share the stories, instead of burying them beneath silence. Not to stir up fear. Fear has never needed help, but to honor memory, to keep each woman's life present, to ensure that the truth, whenever it decides to emerge, finds the door wide open, and a community ready to receive it. The triangle has become a symbol, not of disappearance, but of persistence, a testament to families who refuse to let their love fade or be overwritten by time, to friends who keep memories alive in stories that still make them smile, even through the ache, to communities who hold vigil across years and decades, lighting candles, organizing walks, keeping names spoken long after the world expected them to fall silent. It is also a symbol of a country determined to bring peace, where pain once made its home. Ireland remembers, not with bitterness, but with a steady, unwavering insistence that every person deserves answers, every family deserves closure, every story deserves an ending that isn't swallowed by the dark. The land may guard its secrets. It always has, from ancient legends to modern mysteries. But Ireland guards its people, even harder, and in that stubborn, quiet, relentless protection, hope continues to grow, not loudly, not dramatically, but with the same quiet endurance that has carried the country through countless heartbreaks and countless rebirths. Maybe the real mystery is not why the triangle exists, but why the people who vanished continue to feel so present, like a soft breath in the trees, like footsteps that don't disturb the grass, like names that echo, even when no one speaks them. Thank you for walking quietly with me tonight. Mind yourself on the way out, and carry a little light with you into the dark.